around 1 a.m, the voices started up. They arose far off in the woods, several of them at once, groaning and screaming dark elegies into the night. It was all the same evil gibberish I'd heard 1,000 times before, but they slowly made their way into the open field and eventually to just outside the cabin. I lit the remaining pieces of sage and did a once-over on all the windows that weren't barricaded with furniture. I also donned the medicine pouches and amulet that Tywi and Nathan had given me, hoping they'd be similarly effective in protecting me. Then I remembered Tywi's useless dream catcher and imagined my crumpled corpse lying in the snow beside it. Outside the front door, I distinctly heard my voice calling, "Faye, it's me, Felix. Let me in. Let me in." And from near the bathroom window, my voice again saying, "Hi, sweetie, I miss you so much." It repeated a few other things I've said on the phone in conversation with her, and even a few things I had said to her while she was sleepwalking back at our home in California. There were footsteps on the roof. 2, maybe 3 pairs of little feet stomping all over the ceiling. Voices of crying children paired with them. I stood there in the kitchen, clutching a knife and the herbs, waiting for the end. The voices circled the cabin, as though a handful of deranged lunatics were slowly marching around the perimeter, singing the songs of hell as they went. They begged for help, they laughed maniacally, they whispered and screamed and talked entirely to themselves, all at once. Their dim shadows passed the window curtains over and over. I heard glass breaking in the bedroom, and then in the bathroom. The stomping on the roof grew louder, and the voice at the front door grew more urgent. Someone began knocking on the door, and the others tapped on the living room windows. They all started screaming, "Faye! Faye, let us in!" and "Felix, are you there?" And then, as if heaven sent, a blinding white light illuminated the entire cabin from outside. All of the window curtains at the front of the house lit up, and the sound of motors drowned out the hellish cries. Someone had driven up to the cabin. I heard doors opening and men calling out coherently. The footsteps on the roof thundered overhead to the back of the cabin, and then the screams of children drifted off into the woods out back, echoing as they withdrew. The ranger bashed on the front door, calling out my full name, instructing me to come outside. I looked out the window and saw 5 men, some in uniforms, and the ranger. There was a humongous off-road snowplow, 2 snowmobiles, and a big truck. They'd come to save my life. When I went outside, I just walked up and hugged the ranger. I didn't even grab my winter jacket. He informed me that they were getting everyone off of the mountain because of a problem with the power grid. He said he'd feared I'd freeze to death. The ride down the mountain would have been the happiest ride of my life, except for the view. We snaked across slippery, white roads, and even with the truck's high beams on, I could see the brightest stars I've ever witnessed. But beneath them, dangling in the trees, were dozens and dozens of human bodies. They swung by rope from their feet or necks. Some of them were flayed or missing parts. The ranger did not appear to notice, and I kept my mouth shut. As they passed overhead on our downward crawl, I could almost make out their frozen faces, lifeless for years, maybe decades. Their black blood stained the trunks of the trees. I'm not sure if these were the spirits Tywi talked about, or if I had simply been experiencing temporary insanity. I'm not sure I'll ever know who they were, but I'm guessing that if the ranger showed up any later, I would have become one of them. I will never forget the haunting image of passing underneath them. We arrived at the ranger station and remained there overnight. I slept on a cot in a room of about 15 people, all locals from different places on the mountain. I asked the ranger if he'd heard from Tywi or Nathan. but he said that he hadn't. The next morning, one of his men drove me straight to Denver International Airport, and I boarded a plane without any luggage whatsoever. It didn't matter. I had the ring in my pocket, and I'll never need another jacket again, as long as I live. When I finally got home, Faye let me have it. She kept kissing me and yelling at me. I understood. She was angry that I'd spent so much time trying to take control of this situation, treating her like a child and disregarding her feelings in my crusade to rescue her. She was upset that I consigned her to the care of my best friends without asking, but seemed to appreciate their help. Richard and Jason were very happy to leave my house and never look Faye in the eye again, although they did have some good news for me. Faye had not sleptwalked or slept-talked or done anything out of the ordinary in over 24 hours. This corresponds almost exactly with when I retrieved the ring from the Dreamcatcher. After an hour or so of reprimanding me for being a thick-headed idiot, Faye forgave me, and we laid in bed together and talked about everything. I apologized to her for the way I had treated her and put the ring on her finger. She looked relieved to have it back on. I swore I'd never screw up like that again. We both slept a full night, no strange night terrors or bad dreams or sleep disturbances of any kind. And in the morning, yesterday morning, we had Faye's favorite, waffles. At about 11 a.m., I received a call. To my great relief, it was Nathan. I immediately pressed him for information about Tywi and what exactly had happened after they left the cabin that day. He ignored my question and said, very ominously,
"Please let me speak to the one who followed you home."
I said something like, what? To which he replied,
"The one that calls itself Faye."
My fiancée and I had been sitting on the couch watching the most recent Game of Thrones, so I just sort of handed the phone to her and said, "It's for you." She put it to her ear and said, "Hello?" and then listened for about a minute. I could hear Nathan speaking, but I could not make out what he was saying. Suddenly, a volcano of black puke exploded from Faye's mouth. It absolutely covered the couch and carpet and sent me nearly jumping out of my skin in the process. Faye doubled over onto the floor like a ragdoll, coughing and sputtering. I fell to my knees beside her, panicked, asking if she was all right. I picked up the phone and screamed at Nathan, demanding to know what he had said to her. Nathan just said,
"Please, Felix, please listen,"
and then proceeded to recite some sort of chant or incantation. A wave of syrupy vomit rushed up my throat and out of my mouth, and, as with Faye, it was oily black. I am actually an emetophobe, so vomiting sends me into a state of near catatonia, but Faye had made a quick recovery and was right there to nurse me back to my senses. Nathan spoke to me a bit more and explained what he had done. I'll get to that in a bit. Faye and I spent the rest of the day feeling queasy and eventually went to urgent care across the road to get checked out. They gave us blood tests and checked our vitals and sent us home, telling us that we'd suffered minor food poisoning. But I know deep down it wasn't the damn waffles. Thankfully, for the past several hours, we've been feeling much better. I mentioned a while back that Tywi and Nathan had a disagreement over who the real Faye was, and whether it was even possible for a duplicate of my fiancée to exist. When they hiked back down the mountain from the cabin a few days ago, they had to go up into the forest to avoid snow collapses all over the road. Out there in the woods, they heard the crying of a woman and followed it to an abandoned mine. Both of them knew that it was very likely a trick, but Tywi said that it was their duty to explore the possibility that Faye was alive somewhere on the mountain. The blizzard came on earlier than expected. They stood at the mouth of the mine, listening to the begging of a young woman somewhere off in the dark, but concluded that its voice was too unusual to be a human's. Tywi and Nathan decided to bless the entrance of the mine, which could ward off its dark inhabitants, but their chanting enraged whatever lived in it. It came out of the tunnels and snatched Tywi. He screamed all the way down into the dark, and Nathan couldn't follow. He ran away, terrified, but got lost in the blizzard. He wandered for an hour, fearing death, and eventually came upon a skinned body swinging from a low tree branch. It was so fresh the blood hadn't fully frozen. Nathan knew it was his father's corpse. Eventually he found his way back home. He said his father's voice guided him out of the squall. Nathan explained to me that the imposter's goal of taking over someone's mind was different from its penchant for killing people. These creatures hunt and kill at random, salvaging the human parts they need to walk the earth as mortals for a short time. But their real pleasure derives from conquering a person from within. Faye was one of the unlucky few that are chosen in this way, and the imposter's fixation on her had lasted for decades. After long enough, their continued presence in the body and mind of a victim leaves a stain on the soul. This corruption necessitates a purge, hence the bath party we held in the living room, whose stains, by the way, I have thus failed to banish. Nathan invited me to the funeral ceremony for Tywi. I sadly declined, as I'm already on the verge of losing my job and flat broke from this experience, but I promised that I'd honor his memory in my own way. I can't go back to that place. Fortunately, Nathan was more than understanding and promised that we'd meet again soon. I'm still thinking about all of this. I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. If you're looking for all the answers, you're going to have to help me find them. But I think I may have part of this figured out. The imposter gave Faye's ring back to me. They wanted me to destroy the Dreamcatcher. The ring was an object of great sentimental value, both to Faye and to our relationship. The creature used it to invade Faye's mind and control her thoughts. Its goal was to convince her that it was me, so that she would welcome it into our house late at night. The home, Nathan said, symbolically represented the body, just as the ring represents our union. To be welcomed into the home is to be granted access to Faye. But because the imposter could never learn everything it needed from Faye to mimic me, it gave up on that project and instead came after me. It returned the ring to me, thus giving up its power over Faye, but I broke the Dreamcatcher to retrieve it. As it turns out, the creepy, mysterious Dreamcatcher was in fact protecting the cabin and everyone inside it, which is why the imposter needed to be invited in. When I broke it, the creature could have easily come in and killed me, but it needed information from me before it did. It needed to know one of Faye's darkest secrets to rule her. I'm not sure I'll ever unravel the mystery of the number 5, but I do know one thing. Not knowing what it means actually saved Faye's life. I'm not sure I ever want to know. As for Faye, she's back to normal and in perfect health. She sleeps soundly and only mumbles a bit, which is pretty normal for her. Her sixth sense of humor has returned as well. Last night, as we went to sleep, she turned out the light and said to me, "Thank you for trying so hard." Then she leaned over and licked my face. I'm sorry I haven't posted about this matter in a while, but Faye and I have been trying to forget. Especially with her weird sleep disorder, the best course of action for us was to try and bury what had happened and move on with our lives. The more upset and stressed out she becomes, the more she sleepwalks and sleep talks, and that is when scary things happen. For those of you who haven't heard the prior stories, my fiancée has suffered from extensive sleep disturbances since she was 5. She has night terrors and is an accomplished sleepwalker. At the request of Redditors, I interviewed her, so you can hear all about her weird experiences there. Long story short, some sort of entity became fixated upon her while we were at the cabin in Colorado and made several attempts to coax her into the woods. When those attempts failed, it came after me. It followed us home to California and tried to get into our house at nighttime by communicating with Faye while she sleepwalked. We were both exposed to whatever it was, to the point that it made us ill. A family friend, Nathan, essentially forced us to puke our guts out in a spiritual purging process. Although, I wish he'd told us first because we destroyed my living room carpet. Faye went back to normal and returned to her playful, funny self. She got her strength back, and not just physically, but the strength of her personality returned as well. She's been feisty and won't put up with any of my shit, which was a great sign that she was feeling better. And she's been wearing her engagement ring. It hasn't left her finger since we got it back. But 2 nights ago, weird things started to happen. I absolutely dread writing this because I know that by paying attention to it, I risk exacerbating the situation. The part of the carpet where we'd lost our lunch is permanently stained and rather dark because I couldn't afford to get a decent carpet cleaner out in time. When we were watching, or crying, through the new Game of Thrones on Sunday, Faye pointed out that the stain looked like the shape of a man. It's about 3 feet long and basically looks like some kind of 2-dimensional troll. We made some jokes about it, then went to bed. I rolled over in the middle of the night to put my hand on Faye's back, and the second I touched that empty space on the bed, 1,000 horrible thoughts rushed through my head. Faye hasn't sleptwalked since things settled down, and I feared that this was an omen that our visitor had returned. I found her downstairs. She was sitting in the dark, spine straight, right in front of the TV. It was off. Her eyes were closed, but she was running her fingers across the stain on the carpet, whispering to it and giggling. I raced over and threw on the light, foregoing my rule of never waking her up abruptly from a bout of sleepwalking. I just didn't want this thing to happen again. I couldn't accept it. Just before I shook her awake, she said, "How could I forget?" She came to and had no idea where she was. She seemed unusually upset that I'd woken her up, as if she were in the middle of a very good dream, but then appeared frightened when I told her what was happening. I asked if she remembered anything, but she said no. I can't tell if she lied to me. On our way up the stairs, she inexplicably vomited all over the wall. It was the same dark brown-black color as when Nathan poisoned us. At this point, I was completely freaking out. I tried to keep my cool and helped Faye into bed, got her some water and made sure she was alright. She was absolutely fine and couldn't explain why she puked. Then I shut off the light, closed the bedroom door, and spent about half an hour trying to clean the damn wall off. I've mentioned in my previous post that I'm an emetophobe, so cleaning vomit is basically the worst form of punishment I can imagine. But something distracted me from the horrid stench. No matter how hard I scrubbed, the stain would not come out, and it had splattered roughly into the shape of a man. Because of the fact that Faye was standing halfway up the stairs and barfed down the wall, this time the stain was much longer than the one on the carpet, almost 5 foot tall. When I finally got into bed, Faye was still awake, and was kind enough to give me a really nice shoulder rub as I laid there in a heap. I was nauseated and terrified. She tried to reassure me, but we both knew what was happening. Whatever it is that's fascinated with her, it's back, or it never left. I don't know how long we sat there talking, but eventually I passed out, Faye lying in my arms. She said a few more things in her sleep, but I could never quite catch them. I was just too tired. The next day, I tried to reach out to Nathan, but he wasn't answering his phone. I had to work, so I didn't see Faye all day, and I got home before she did. So I spent several hours jumping at every sound outside while grading my students' final papers. When she did get home, she said that she'd felt sick all day and just wanted to go to sleep, so she went upstairs and showered and then got into bed. Around 10:30 p.m, I shut off my laptop and headed upstairs. Faye was sitting on the bed, feet on the ground, staring out the open window into the woods across the street. I gently laid her down, rubbed her back until she snored. That's the only way to guarantee she won't get up for a long time, and I inspected the whole house. I don't know if I'm just freaking myself out or if I'm just tired, but the vomit stains seem bigger now than they were before. I'm calling a guy tomorrow to come do a professional cleaning job, but I'm pissed because I know I'm going to get stuck with a $200 bill for the job. I checked the backyard and didn't see anything, then made sure the front door was locked and all the windows were sealed tight. The last window I checked was the one in the guest room, the one on which Faye had drawn the number 5 backwards while sleepwalking. It was late and dark, and all of the memories of last month's events just kept cycling through my mind over and over. I felt dizzy and sleepy, almost hypnotized. It was a strange feeling, an ineffable mixture of strange relaxation and terror. I cannot explain to you why I did this, but without even thinking about it, I reached out my hand and lazily drew a backwards 5 on the window. And in that tiny little moment, I saw something move behind the trees across the street. Faye abruptly burst into sleep laughter from down the hall. As I walked back into the bedroom into the dark, I could hear her giggling the entire way. There's nothing else to report right now. It's 10:31 p.m. Tuesday as I write this, and I'm going to go to sleep. I will update if there are any new developments. I pray that there aren't any. Update. Soon. A lot of Redditors have mentioned that since I retrieved Faye's ring from the creepy dreamcatcher, it's possible that it's been cursed. After all, the ring was given back to me. It could be what is causing the new disturbances around my house. So, Faye and I have decided to take the long trek back to Pikes Peak from whence the evil ring came and destroy it by throwing it into the mine at the top of the mountain. We've gathered a fellowship of 7 other people to help us on this journey. Just kidding. But seriously, a lot of people have speculated that the ring is now the problem. I am taking this into consideration, but Faye is not willing to part with it right now, seeing as how she got it back. But if the entity seeking Faye did in fact curse the ring and got me to break the dreamcatcher to retrieve it, it is even more clever than I could have anticipated. More on this if I decide to make a move. We had a professional carpet cleaning service come out yesterday and try to tackle the puke stain situation. The guy told me over and over,
"That's not vomit. I can get vomit out."
It took him a long time, but he finally managed to get most of the stain off of the carpet in the living room and recommended that we get checked out at the hospital. I told him we already had. Some parts of the carpet are still spotted and ruined. He gave me a discount. The wall in the stairwell is another story. The guy took one look at it and said that we needed to paint it, but I insisted that the stain had to be removed before doing so. He told me to strip and sand the wall, or he could come back and do it on his day off for a small fee. I told him I'd take care of it. He made an exorcism joke and left. I was not amused. Faye came home very excited yesterday. She got a promotion at her job. We celebrated by going out for dinner at our favorite steakhouse. She ordered her normal meal, thank God, and had a few drinks. I don't drink at all, so I was the D&D for the evening. When we got home, we pretty much went right to bed, and on the way upstairs, she drunkenly said, "Fuck that guy," and pointed a lazy hand at the stain on the wall. That night, I had a very strange dream. I dreamed I was trying to scrub the stain off the wall, just like I had a few days ago, but this time I was scrubbing in the dark. Moonlight was just barely seeping through the window and illuminating the outline of the stain, which looked more like a man than ever before. It loomed over me as I crouched there on the stairs, but then something weird happened. The wall underneath the stain turned mushy like oatmeal and gave way to my hand. My arm went right through the drywall. When I pulled it out, there was a faint light coming through the hole. I pushed more and more of the squishy wall away. It crumbled and plopped onto the floor on the other side. At last, I cleared a hole big enough to squeeze through. It led into a familiar place. I realized where I was the second I stepped in. It was freezing cold, even in the dream. I was in the cellar of the cabin where I'd found all those jars and that hair, where I'd found the pieces needed to make more dream catchers. I felt instantly afraid and turned around to go back into my house, but the wall was sealed shut. The only way out of the cellar was through the open panels at the top of the wooden staircase, leading to the outside. Snow was falling down onto the stairs. I remember seeing something on the ground behind one of the shelves. I picked it up and instantly recognized its importance. It made me feel like I understood everything better. But before I could see what it was, I was woken by Faye. We were still in bed and she was sitting up against the pillows, running her fingers across my neck and back. She was looking down at me, smiling, but her hair was dangling in such a way that it obscured her face a little, and the moon lit her up from the window behind her, so she looked different. I recognized my fiance's hair and body, but her face looked old and weathered, like an old man's. At that point, I noticed her hand felt different too. It was rough and heavy, like a guy's. It took me a second to realize that she was probably asleep, so I sat still and just watched her. After a few minutes of this, she abruptly got out of bed and walked to the door, mumbling to herself about that sound again. I followed her quietly, wondering what she'd do. She walked through the hall, never searching for the light switch, and stood at the top of the stairs. She started whisper arguing with something down there in the dark, like when a couple is bickering in public but they're trying to hide it. She said, "You need to leave. You need to get the fuck out of here and never come back. I don't know any of them. I don't know anybody. Is that you? Who's with you? Who's making all that noise? You just gonna stand down there and call my name all night? Well, why don't you come up here then? You think I don't know what you're doing?" The last thing she said was, "We don't know! Leave us alone!" She shouted it so loud it took me off guard and momentarily paralyzed me with fear. I rushed over and grabbed her before she could fall down the stairs. She told me to get off of her and that she didn't need any help, then brushed past me toward the bedroom. Along the way, she vomited. I got to spend another hour trying to clean that up while she slept soundly, and guess what? New stain. It wasn't until writing this that I realized the stain has been making its way closer and closer to the bedroom. This morning, before work, I talked to Faye about what had happened. She had no recollection of any of it, including barfing up our expensive dinner, but she did say that she heard several voices outside the house early this morning. She said that there was a child calling out, "Where is she? Where is she?" and a man grumbling angrily, but she couldn't make out his words. She also said that I was talking in my sleep this morning, which is something I almost never do. Faye agreed to seeing the doctor again because of the vomiting, and also mentioned to me, after reading the Reddit comments, that hypnotism might be a good thing to try. So, we are looking for one in our town. More on that if anything develops. Also, her older sister Becca is going to come to town in a few days to visit us and see how things are going. Becca lives in Arizona with her husband and infant son, so I've only ever actually met her a handful of times. It'll be nice having some extra people in the house for once. In other news, Nathan is still not returning my calls, so I might try the Ranger tonight. I also want to let you all know that it's finals week, both for me as a graduate student and for the undergraduate students that I teach. I might not be able to update every other day like I usually do. If I'm missing for a day or two extra, don't be alarmed. I'm keeping a close watch on Faye. And I have one last thing to report. Today at lunch, I put my hand down in my office and drifted off for a few minutes. This is really unusual for me because I'm a chronic insomniac and do not take naps almost ever. But I had another dream. Tywi came to me. For those of you who don't know, Tywi was a Native American man who lived near Pikes Peak. He and his son, Nathan, blessed our cabin and helped Faye and me in our struggle last month. He died in the woods under mysterious circumstances during my last nights at the cabin. In the dream, I was looking out our bedroom window, and Tywi was standing at the tree line across the street. It was really him, not the creature that did a horrifying impersonation of him. He was pointing into the forest. I think I'm supposed to go in there, but I don't know whether I can trust my own dreams anymore. That is where the imposter hides. I literally just got to work 30 minutes ago, and I got a call from Faye's boss. I'm on their emergency contact list. They sent her home for behaving erratically. I'm on my way home now.